Hey Chevra, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf, technically we're supposed to be studying, let's see, this is a risky move. Oh, okay, that kind of worked out somewhat okay. This is a riskier move. Let's see, what if I go like this? Come on. Alright, that worked out relatively okay. Akaponim. So, you're right, today we're supposed to be learning Daf Yudalid of Masechta Sukkah, but I had a little bit yesterday of like a brain malfunction, I guess you can call it. So we had to stop a little bit early. I apologize for the malfunction. We seem to be back on schedule, which is good. I think I just needed to drink more coffee. So we have a little bit of work to do on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, talking about Tuma and Tara and Yados and Uktzin. Oy vavoy, fun stuff. And then we move on to a new Mishnah, finally, on Daf Yudalid Amud Aleph, which discusses using different size planks, which is interesting. We'll see a machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda about how wide planks for schach can be. Very interesting discussion. And then we will see machlokas Rav and Shmuel regarding that machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Fun times. Let's get started on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. About halfway through the page, let's say. I guess I'm trying to make myself feel a little better about myself. Truth is a little bit more than halfway. So, V'amar Reb Abba Amar Rav Huna. It's about, 15, 20 lines from the top of the page. V'amar Abba Amar Rav Huna. Says Reb Abba, in the name of Rav Huna. Habotzer Lagas, somebody who harvests grapes for grape juice, for making wine. Ein lo yodis. Those grapes don't have yodis. Now, I don't remember how far I got yesterday on this, or what extent I got yesterday on this, but akoponim. Who could tell me what yados are? Yados are stems, essentially, right? So if you have a grape, and a grape has a stem, right? So if a dead sheretz touches the grape, so the grape becomes tameh, right? Now, what if a dead sheretz touches the stem of the grape? So that's what's called the yad, the stem, the handle of the grape. And yes, the answer is that if the dead sheretz touches the stem of the grapes, then the grape also becomes tameh. So now we're saying though that abotzer legas, says Reb Abba in the name of Rav Huna, that a fellow who harvests grapes for winemaking, ein lo yodis, those grapes don't have handles, and therefore if a dead sheretz, let's say, were to touch the stem, the grape would still be intact. Enjoy. Rav Menashe bar Gada Amar Rav Huna says, would you eat that grape, by the way? I don't know, a dead mouse is lying on the stem of a grape. You eat it? I'll leave that up to you. Rav Menashe bar Gada Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Menashe bar Gada, name Rav Huna, hakotzer l'schach ein lo yadis. Okay. A fellow harvests like grain epis. He harvests, wheat, whatever it is, and he's going to use that for his schach. And so we're saying in that case also it doesn't have yodis, right? So if you harvest grain to eat the grain, so then the stalk is going to be like a handle for the grain, and if tuma touches the stalk, then the grain becomes tameh. However, it says Rav Menashe bar Gada that if a fellow harvests grain for his schach, so then the yados law goes away, and if a dead sheretz touches the stalk, so then the grain remains intact. Okay. Manda Amar Kotzer Kol Shekein Potzer. Okay. So Rav Menashe bar Gada, who says that even if you harvest grain for schach, that's enough for the stalk to not be considered a handle. Kol Shekein Potzer. And then certainly Rav Menashe bar Gada would say that in the case of when you harvest grapes for winemaking, that the stems would not be considered handles. Because certainly he does not want the handles in his wine, because it'll absorb some of the wine, it'll ruin the wine. So certainly he has no interest in these handles, and these handles will not transfer tumah. Okay, so according to Menashe bar Gada, he says that if you harvest grain for schach, the stalks are not handles. And certainly, if you harvest grapes for winemaking, certainly these stems are not handles. Manda Omer Botzer she'ein lo yados. So now, according to Reb Abba, however, he says that if you harvest grapes for winemaking, so in that case, the stems are not considered handles and do not transfer tuma. Avol kotzer, but harvesting grain for the intention of making schach, yesh lo yados, they would have handles. So the stalk would be considered a handle for the food. Because he wants the stalk there he wants the stalk there. Or is it, he wants the stalk and he wants the food, he wants everything there, so that they don't get scattered, right? So whereas by the winemaking, Reb Abba would argue that he really has no interest in the stems, they're only going to ruin things. However, for the sukkah making, he could argue that the stalks would be considered handles and transfer tumah, because you kind of want them there in order to make sure that the grain itself doesn't get lost and scattered. Now the Gemara wants to say that, let us say that what Rav Menashe Bar Gada is claiming, which is that if a fellow harvests grain for schach, so if a fellow harvests grain for schach, so then it no longer is considered a handle, right? That's what Rav Menashe Bar Gada says. So let's say that this claim of his is taka machlokas tanoim d'tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, soche te'enim. If you have fig branches, uvoyin te'enim, and on the fig branches are figs, ufarchile nuvoyim anovim, or if you have grape vines, and on the grapevines are grapes. Kashin uvoyin shibolim, you have stalks of wheat, and on them are wheat. Machbedus uvoyin tamarim, date branches, and on them are dates. Kulon, in all of these cases, in psoles muruba ala ochlin kshera, if there is more stalk or vine, kilu psoles, than the ochel, right? You can't make schach with ochel, with food, it's makabel tumah, but you can make schach with the vine or with the stalk or whatever. So in all of these cases, if there's more psoles, more stalk or vine or whatever it is, or branch, than the fruit, so then ksheira, you can use it for schach. V'im lav psula. But if there's more food than there is branch, so then it's a problem, because you can't make schach with food. Acherim omim, now this is where it comes in, kind of where we start seeing the machlokas, which is acherim omim, say the acherim, which is Reb Meir, achiyehu koshin ruben ala ha-yodis ve'al ha-ochlin, says acherim, that in order for these grains to be considered good schach, you have to have more psoles than both the yados and the ochlin. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the distinction is between the psoles and the yados and the ochlin. Because I thought that the yados were kilu the kashin, but I don't know, maybe there's different things, or maybe it depends on the species. I don't know exactly. However, what I do know is that acherim is taking into account yados. In the context of schach, acherim is still taking into account yados, whereas the chachamim are not taking into account yados. So we want to say that this claim of Rav Menashe Bar Gada, that when you harvest grain for schach, there's no yados, so let's say that it's actually a machlokas tanoim. The Tanakama would agree with Rav Menashe Bar Gada, but acherim would disagree, and acherim would say that there are yados even when it comes to harvesting grain for schach. So my lab, let's say that this is the machlokas between the Tanakama and acherim. The Marsover yesh lo en yados, that acherim holds that schach does have yados, u'Marsover ein lo en yados, whereas the Tanakama holds that schach does not have yados. Givaldig, right? Right. Let's go weiter. Reb Abba vadai tanoi. Okay, so we want to say that according to Reb Abba, who doesn't really say anything about schach, all he says is that if you harvest grapes for wine, so then it does not have yados, but he doesn't say anything about schach. So he'll take a look at this machlokas and he'll say, okay, nice clean machlokas, great. Tanakama says no yados. Rav Meir says yes yados. Rav Menashe bar Gada, however, according to Rav Menashe bar Gada, who makes the claim that when you harvest grain for schach, there's no concept of yados, so then he'll argue that even acherim, who do take into account yados, still agree with him that there are no yados when it comes to schach. How could this be? Milema tanoi. Do we say that this is necessarily machlokas tanoim about yados regarding the Tanakama and acherim? Amr lach Rav Menashe would respond to you and say, D'chulei alma sabri akotze l'schach en lo yados. Everybody agrees with me, says Rav Menashe bar Gada, that a fellow who harvests grain for schach, there are no yados. Everyone agrees with that. Everyone agrees with me. No yados. So then what's the machlokas between Reb Meir, between the Tanakama and acherim? Kigon shekotzitzon la'achila. That is talking about a specific case where you harvested the grain for eating initially. Chaver, you hear that? You didn't harvest the grain for schach. You harvested the grain for eating. So it was ochel, and that's why there is a yad. And then you changed your mind and you said, wait, I take it back. I want it to be for schach. And therefore, that is why acherim say that even though you're using this grain for schach, still it has yados, because initially your intention was for food. But if that's the case, that he really harvested this grain for eating initially, well then how could the rabbis possibly argue that there are no yados? Certainly then there should be yados if he initially harvested it for eating, and once it was food, then there was yados for the food. So then memele, where even after you change your mind for schach, it should still have the yados. So how could the Rabbanan say that there's no yados? And if you're going to say, well, the rabbis say ein achinami, that yes, when he harvested the grain initially with the intention of food, there was yados, but then when he changes his mind to use the grain for schach, well then there are no longer yados. The yados go away. But does it work like that? Can you just change your mind like that? If a fellow harvests schach with the intention of food and it has yados, can he just say, oh, I changed my mind, I want to use them for schach? And if you harvested for food, can he just change his mind and say, oh, now I want to use them for schach and there's no longer yados? But we learn in the Mishnah, and we've seen this in Masechta Shabbos, vessels can become tamei with thought, and the only way to undo the tumah is with a shinur maaseh. So, for example, let's say you have hides l'maaseh, hides. So you have hides, and you want to use it, so you take an animal, kill it, skin it, tan it, and in the process, it gets to a point where it's good enough that you can use it as a rug, to use it, to wipe your feet on or whatever. Now that is a lower level, or lower requirement of processing than if you're going to make it for like shoes. You'd have to process it better. So in your mind, once already you say, you know what, this is going to be a floor mat. So then you're done. Well, once you're done, it's a kli. And if it's a kli, it's makabel tumah. If you now change your mind and say, wait, no, I changed my mind. I want to keep on working on the leather and I want to make it into shoes. Too late. It's already considered finished. You can't just change your mind. It's still going to keep on becoming tummy. The only way that it'll become no longer able to become tummy would be if you make a shinur maaseh, like actually change it and I guess, make it into, straps for shoes or whatever it is. So once you actually make a physical change, at that point it loses its status of tumah that it had initially. So again, so kelim yardili de tumah b'machshava. So kelim could become tameh or able to become tameh just by a thought. When you figure, okay, I'm done, it's now considered a kli. Ve'ed olim mitumasan ella b'shinur maaseh. The only way to undo that would be with a physical change, not just a thought. Maise motzi miyad, maise miyad machshava. An activity, an action is able to release from a different action or even from a thought. Well, from a thought or even from a different action. Machshava, but thoughts alone, ein motzi lo miyad maise lo miyad machshava are unable to do activities or thoughts. Givaldik. The point being that we just basically were explaining what we just said a second ago. That the point being that in order to change the status of tumah, you actually have to make a physical difference. And therefore, going back to our case, a fellow harvests grain for food, and now it has yados, right? The stalks are considered handles to the grain. Simply changing your mind and saying, no, wait, I actually want them to be schach is not going to be able to undo the status of yados for tumah that they have. So how could the chachamim say that there are no yados in this case? Well, maybe you're going to say, if you look at that Mishnah, what does it say? Kol ha-kelim, all of the vessels could become tameh with thought, but not leave that tumah except for shina maisa. However, kelim are chashuv, they're significant. However, yados, handles for what? Handles for food. They're not as significant not as chashuv, as important as vessels. It's just food. So maybe in that case, machshava naisuv, machshava salka. Maybe when it comes to food, you can make it tameh, you can give it yados by thought, by deciding, I'm harvesting for food, and then you can actually change it to lose its status of yados simply by a machshava, by deciding, actually I want to use it for my schach. However, v'atnan, but that wouldn't work. You can't say that. You cannot say that when it comes to yados, which is tumah of ochlin, you could simply just change it with your thought. Because, we learned in a Mishnah called yados ochlin, handles, yados, when it comes to food, shebisason bigorin, that you broke them up. So let's say you had grain, and then you broke it up in the granary to horos. So now the yados go away. Now that you broke them up, and we're going to have to explain what this means, what exactly broke up means, but you broke it up in the granary, so now the yados goes away. Now, b'shlam l'man da'amr b'sasan hitir agudan shaper. So now, if we say that, what this means is that, bisasan means that you literally just undid the bundle. I mean, you didn't make any physical change to the actual grain. You just opened up the bundle that it was in, but you didn't make a physical change. So we're saying that even without a physical change, it can go from having yados, right? It says tahoros. They no longer have yados. So we can see that even without a physical change, it can affect the status, the tumah entire status of the grain, that the yados goes away. So therefore, if that's the case, we could say the same thing also when it comes to the schach. You initially harvest the grain for food, and then you change your mind for schach. That alone, just like when it comes to undoing the bundle of the grain in the granary, and it changes the stat, now there's no longer yados. So also when it comes to when you decide that I'm not using it for food, I'm using it for lemaise schach, so at that point already it's no longer yados. However, if you say that, what does it mean bisason? Bisason means you mamish crush them, and at that point the handle goes away. Well, if that's the case, then so we see that the handle only goes away and it's tahor only when you actually make a shinu maisa, when you crush it. If that's the case, and we're saying that when it comes to schach, it's talking about where you initially thought that you were going to use the grain for food, and then you changed your mind that you're going to use it for schach. That's not enough to just make the yados go away. So hachanami shebisason mamish. So the Gemara answers, well, we could say here that also it's talking about that you mamish crushed them. So you initially harvested grain for eating, and then you said, I'm going to use them for schach, and then you crushed them. And because you crushed them, so then that's why they no longer have yados. So if that's the case, my tamayu da acherim. Well, then how come the acherim say that there is a din of yados? According to acherim, there's a din of yados, but if you crush them, shouldn't the yados go away? So the Amr Rabbi Yossi. Well, they hold like Rabbi Yossi, because in that same Mishnah says that's not Rabbi Yossi mitame. The Rabbi Yossi says that in the same case of bisason, which we're saying it means to crush them, the Chacham say that the yados goes away. According to Rabbi Yossi, the yados stays, and therefore acherim who say that when it comes to schach that you harvested the grain for food and then changed your mind and then crushed them now for schach. So acherim say like Rabbi Yossi, who says that the yados remain.
So hi my, but we say, but 1 second, apples and oranges, b'shlam hasam. I understand when it comes to the grain in the granary, that even after you crush them, Rabbi Yossi says that they remain tamei, that their yados remain. Time with Rabbi Yossi, chazia l'chidu Rabbi Yochanan l'chidu Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Because according to Rabbi Yossi, he says that they remain tamei even after you crush the grain in the granary, because there's still a use for the yados, for the stalks. Like Reish Lakish, Dam Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, hol v'ru'uyus lahofchon be'eser. Well, in the granary, even after you crush them, there's still a use for the stalks, which is that with a pitchfork, you can move them around with the stalks. It makes it easier. But over here, when it comes to schach, once you crush them, what are they fit for? That Acherim would say that the yados remain. The answer is, well, when you take down the schach, it'll be easier to move them around when you have the stalks there, so therefore they remain relevant, and that's why Acherim would say, like Rabbi Yossi, that even after you crush them for the schach, so you harvested the grain for food, you then crush them when you're going to use them for schach. At that point, the yados goes away according to Tanakama. According to Acherim, they remain because you could still use them to kind of move around the schach when you take them down. Okie dokie. Gufa, we just said a second ago, Kol yados ochon shebesasan begoren tohoros, that all of these yados, these handles in the granary, that if you crush them, so then they become tar. Rabbi Yossi matame. Rabbi Yossi says that they remain tamei. Actually, no. So if you what do we call it initially? You broke them. So Rabbi Yossi says that they remain tamei. My besasan. What does breaking them mean? Rabbi Yochanan omer besasan mamish. Rabbi Yochanan says it means mamish, to break them up. Rabbi Lazar Omer says Rabbi Lazar hitir agudan. It means to just undo the bundle. B'shlam Rabbi Lazar Omer besasan hitir agudan. I understand according to Rabbi Lazar, who says that it just means that you undo the bundle of the grain. I understand why Rabbi Yossi says that it's time. We're basically just reiterating what we just said a minute ago. But if you say according to Rabbi Yochanan that it means that you mamish are going to break these bundles of grain, how come Rabbi Yossi says that they are tamei? After all, you're breaking them. How could they remain yados for food? You broke them apart. Reb Shimon ben Lakish, since you're able to use them to move around with a pitchfork. Wow. How you guys doing? I guess I can understand why this kind of broke my brain yesterday. I mean, with all the stuff like the wavy vision and the no sleep and the no coffee, I mean, that was not exactly going to help. But, Chevra, would you agree with me that this was not simple stuff? It's complicated stuff. However, friends, this next little bit of Gemara, these next 2 lines of Gemara, to make it all worth it. You ready? Amr Belazar, says Belazar, how come the prayers of the righteous, of the tzaddikim, are compared to a pitchfork? Lo to say to you, just like this pitchfork, it moves around grain in the granary from this place to that place, all over the place. Also, the prayers of the righteous, flips around God's intentions, his knowledge, to something mean to something merciful. Beautiful. That like a pitchfork, the tzaddikim are able to, move around God's machshava, so that instead of giving achzarius, he gives us rachmanis, which is what we want. Very, very beautiful. Okay, finally, new Mishnah. Woo! Mesakrim b'nesarim divrei Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you are allowed to make schach with planks of wood. We're going to see a machlokas in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel exactly how wide these planks are. But planks of wood. Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to use planks of wood. Rabbi Meir Oser. Meir says you're not allowed to use planks of wood. Fine. If you put in the sukkah a plank that is 4 tfachim wide, kshera, it's kosher, as long as you don't sleep under it. Okay, fine. It's kshera as long as you don't sleep under it. We're going to have to figure out exactly what this means. Fine. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav. Here we go. Says Rav. Kind of explain. I wouldn't say clarify. Nothing. Sukkah is very eruvini. I mean, nothing's exactly clear. Let's be clear about that at least. It's complicated. Sukkah is complicated. It's more fun because it's practical, but it's very, very complicated. Rav says Rav Machlokas ben Asar and Sheish Boin Arba. Says Rav Machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda who says kosher and Reb Meir says pasul is when the plank is 4 tfachim wide. To Reb Meir islay gezeres tikra, Reb Meir who says that the plank is pasul schach, he holds of what's called gezeres tikra. Reb Yehuda leislay gezeres tikra, whereas Reb Yehuda does not hold of what's called gezeres tikra. Gezeres tikra means that we're concerned that a fellow is going to conclude, what's the point of sitting in the sukkah? I may as well sit in my own house. Tikra being a roof, the roof of my house, meaning the roofs of houses are generally made with planks that are 4 tfachim wide, and therefore if a person's in his sukkah and he uses for schach planks that are 4 tfachim wide, he'll look up at his schach and say, wait a second, I'm using for my schach the same materials that I'm using for my house, I may as well just sit in my house. Therefore, Reb Meir is concerned that somebody's going to draw that conclusion, and therefore he says, once a plank is 4 tfachim wide, which is the same width that you're going to use in your house, we say, wait, hold your horses, that's not okay, you have to make it smaller. Rabbi Yehuda says he's not concerned that people are going to draw the conclusion that I may as well sit in my house. Okay? So again, let's read it again. Rav says, Rav Machlokas ben Isar and Sheish Boin Arba, that the Machlokas is when the planks are 4 tfachim wide. The Reb Meir islay gezeres tikra, that Reb Meir is concerned that, look, if it's 4 tfachim wide, a person might decide, you know what, I may as well just sit in my house, which is obviously not a good idea. Rabbi Yehuda lays like zeres tikra, whereas Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned that a person is not going to go sit in his house because his planks are 4 tfachim wide. Fine. Aval, however, if the planks are less than 4 tfachim wide, everyone agrees. I mean, what's there to be concerned about? You know, if it's less than 4 tfachim, then it's fine. Ushmuel Amar. Shmuel's opinion is that the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir is when the planks are not 4 tfachim wide. Aval, yesh boin arba. However, if the planks are 4 tfachim wide, divrei kol psula. Everyone agrees, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees, that 4 tfachim or wider, it's going to be possible, because 4 tfachim or wider, you really have to be concerned, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to be concerned about gezeres tikra that you might end up eating inside. What do you mean if the planks are not 4 tfachim wide? So then there's a machlokas whether they're kosher or not. I mean, what? Even if they're less than 3 tfachim wide? What? Even if they're like really thin pieces of wood, you're not allowed to use that? Well, it's just regular reeds. Obviously, you're allowed to use just regular reeds for schach. So Amar Papa says, Papa Achi Kamar. This is what Shmuel is saying. Yesh boin arba divrei kol psula. If the planks are 4 tfachim wide, everyone agrees that they're possible because of gezeres tikra. At that point, we have to be concerned if you use those planks, which are the regular planks that you use for your house, for constructing houses, you may end up eating inside of your house. And if it's less than 3 tfachim wide, everyone agrees that those are just kosher schach, right? That's just plain old kosher schach. My time, because they're just regular old schach. Ki plige. Where do they argue? Mishlosh ad arba. They argue when the width of the planks are between 3 and 4 tfachim wide. My sover came to the lesson ushir makom lo gazrinan. The Rabbi Yehuda says, look, at the end of the day, it's not 4 tfachim wide. Again, everyone agrees if it's 4 tfachim wide, it's a problem of gezeres tikra according to Shmuel. Says Rabbi Yehuda, but if it's less than 4 tfachim wide, so then memele, what's the reason? There's no reason to say gezeres tikra. Well, my sover was Rabbi Meir's opinion is, yeah, eno chinami, but kiven den afkibu mitoras lavud gazrinan. But Shmuel says that Rabbi Meir's opinion is that eno chinami. It's not 4 tfachim wide. However, it's more than 3 tfachim wide, and it's no longer lavud. It's big enough that if there was a space, if it wasn't a plank, but rather just air, we can no longer say lavud anymore because it's 3 tfachim or more. So therefore, since already it's at a place where it might not be 4 tfachim, but it's already past lavud size, we're concerned already we start getting concerned about gezeres tikra. Says Reb Meir, it's too close to comfort. Anything after 3 tfachim is already not allowed. Fine. So that is the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about where is the machlokas between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rav, the machlokes is when it's 4 tefachim wide. According to Shmuel, the machlokes is when it's between 3 and 4 tefachim wide. Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, right? I think, definitely our Mishnah. We learned at the end of our Mishnah in the Seifa, if you put on the what? On the Sukkah, a plank that is 4 tefachim wide, kshera, the Sukkah is kosher, as long as you don't sleep under it. Now, Bishlam the Shmuel, now I understand according to Shmuel, that the machlokas between between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Meir between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir is when the plank is less than 4 tefachim. But if it's 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees that it's possible. That's why you shouldn't sleep under it. So according to Shmuel, this is Givaldig. Why is it Givaldig? Because according to Shmuel, everyone agrees. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that once the plank is 4 tefachim wide, we say Gezeres Tikra. Even Rabbi Yehuda says Gezeres Tikra according to Shmuel. After, once it's 4 tefachim wide, and it's going to be a problem. You're not allowed to use it. Now, therefore, I can understand the Mishnah. That says the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? That if you have a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, the sukkah is kosher. Why is the sukkah kosher? You're going to have to say that it's on the side, and therefore you could say dofen akuma, so it's no problem because dofen akuma you have till 4 amas, so therefore you get around it with dofen akuma. But nonetheless, you won't be able to sleep under it because it's pasol schach. So I understand according to Shmuel, who says that according to everybody, a plank that's 4 tefachim wide is pasol. That's why the Mishnah says you're not allowed to sleep under it. So even though the sukkah might be kosher because the schach is positioned next to the plank is positioned next to the wall, therefore you can say dofen akuma, whatever it is, but don't sleep under it because everyone agrees it's pasol. But according to Rav, who says that the machlokas is dafka when the plank is 4 tefachim wide, but if it's less than 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees that it's kosher. Well then, according to Rabbi Yehuda, why shouldn't you sleep under this plank that's 4 tefachim wide? Right? It sounds like the Sefer is going according to everybody when it says that when the Mishnah says that if it's 4 tefachim wide, don't sleep under it, nobody seems to argue. So it sounds like it's even according to Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Yehuda would say that a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, according to Rav, is taka kosher. There's no problem with it. So then why can't I sleep under it? So answers the Gemara, Misavai Tiviakol, he Seifa under Reb Meir. Well, who says that the Seifa is taka according to everybody? Who says that Reb Yehuda would agree with the Seifa? The Seifa is Reb Meir. I mean, if you read in the Mishnah, first we have the opinion of Reb Yehuda, then we have the opinion of Reb Meir, and then we have the Seifa which says don't sleep under a plank that's 4 tefachim wide. So Rav will just say that thing about not sleeping under the plank 4 tefachim wide is take Reb Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda would say, Gesundheit, sleep under the plank. See what I care. It's kosher schach. You hear? Of course. Toshma, come in here. Shnei sedinin mitztarfin. That if you have, 2 cloths, right? So you have 2 cloths, they could join together to create 4 tefachim of pasol schach, right? You're not allowed to use cloth. It's a kli, it's makabel tuma, so you can't use it for schach. If it's less than 4 tefachim, so it's not going to pasol the sukkah. But if it's 4 tefachim, so it will make the sukkah pasol. Okay? Shnei nisarin ein mitztarfin. But 2 planks do not join together in order to create 4 tefachim and say that it's a problem. Okay? Reb Meir says, Reb Meir af nisarin kisdinin, even the planks are like the cloths, i.e. they could join together to create 4 tefachim and pasol the sukkah. Now, Bishlam the Shmuel, so I understand this brisa according to Shmuel. Shmuel says that the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir is when the plank is less than 4 tefachim, and therefore what? And therefore, so this machlokas in this brisa between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is talking about planks that are less than 4 tefachim, and Reb Yehuda is saying that they don't join together to create 4 tefachim of pasol schach, right? Meaning we're talking about planks that are, let's say, 3 tefachim, right? Right? Planks that are, let's say, 3 tefachim. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying, look, these are kosher planks, they're not going to join together to passel the sukkah because they're completely kosher. What's there to passel? They're kosher schach. Whereas Reb Meir says, what are you talking about? Reb Meir says that these planks that are 3 tefachim wide are passel schach. Now, one 3 tefach plank won't passel the sukkah, but put another one next to it, it's going to be mitzdarif. It's going to join together and it's going to passel the sukkah. So again, I understand according to Shmuel, who says that the machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is when the plank is less than 4 tefachim. So I get what we're talking about. Does it join together to create 4 tefachim of pasol schach or not? But if they're, according to Shmuel, if there's 4 tefachim, if it's already 4 tefachim wide, then everyone agrees that it's pasol. My mitzdarfim la'arba. So what does it mean? Are these planks going to be mitzdarif or not? It means that these are planks that are less than 4 tefachim, and the question is, are they going to join together to create 4 tefachim of pasol schach? According to Reb Meir, yes, they sure will, and you better be careful. According to Reb Yehuda, what's there to join together? It's all kosher schach. But according to Rav, who says that the machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is when the planks are 4 tefachim wide. But if the planks are less than 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees that it's kosher. Well then, heichidami, how do we understand this machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda in this brisa that we just quoted with the planks joining together? Either isbu arba, so if it's talking about, well, the machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is when it's 4 tefachim wide, well then lamalu it's tarufe, then what are we talking about joining together? It's already 4 tefachim wide, meaning according to Reb Meir, who says that a plank that's 4 tefachim wide is pasol, right? So then what does that have to be joined together for anything? 4 tefachim of pasol schach in and of itself is already a problem. You don't have to join together with anything else. He delays barba amai. And if it's talking about a plank that's less than 4 tefachim, then what's Reb Meir's problem? According to Rav, if it's less than 4 tefachim, everyone agrees that it's kosher. So all of these bu'arba, so must be talking about where it is 4 tefachim wide. Okay, so if that's the case, then what does it mean that according to Reb Meir it's going to join together? What does it have to join together for? It's already 4 tefachim wide. It's already pasol. Mitzdarfen la'arba amis min atzad. It joins together to create 4 amas from the side. So Rav would have to explain that when Reb Meir says that it is going to join together to create a problem, it's going to join together to create a problem if it's more than 4 tefachim, and you can no longer say dofen akuma. Okay. Lishna achrina, another way to understand this, which is Seder, just a different way to understand this, I guess. Bishlam Shmuel, I understand according to Shmuel, the Amr b'shein boyan arba machlokus, who says that the machlokus between Reb Yehuda and Reb Meir is when the schach is not, when the plank is less than 4 tefachim. Aval yesh boyan arba, but if it is 4 tefachim, tivakol psula, everyone says it's possible. My mitzdarfim la arba amis min atzad. Okay, so what are we joining together? We're joining together for four amas from the side, okay? According to Rab, B'shlam Reb Meir, I understand according to Reb Meir, my mitzdarfim la'arba amas min atzad. What are these things joining together for? They're joining together for 4 amas from the side, right? Meaning you have all this schach, which is less than 3 tefachim, and where am I? According to Rab, that I understand according to Reb Meir. So you have all this schach, and the schach is these planks are 4 tefachim wide, and we're saying that they could join together to create a headache of dofen akuma if it's more than 4 amas. Ela l'Rab Yehuda the Amar afilu yesh boyan arba ksher, but according to Rab Yehuda who says that even if the planks are 4 tefachim wide, it's still kosher. Well then, mayin mitzdarfin kanim ba'amaninu. Then what are we talking about? Whether they're not mitzdarif or not? Obviously they're not mitzdarif. They're kosher schach. So I become Reb Meir mitzdarfin, I'm Reb Yehuda a mitzdarfin. Well, since Reb Meir says the lashon of whether or not they are going to join together, so Reb Yehuda says the same lashon of that they're not joining together. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing to join together in the first place. I don't know what if I just said, but according to Reb Yehuda, because they're kosher anyway, so there's nothing to join together. Okay, the second lashon, I don't think it's as clear as the first one, but it doesn't really change much over there. Says the Gemara, Tanakavasa the Rav, Tanakavasa the Shmuel. We have a brisa supporting Rav, and we have a brisa supporting Shmuel, Tanakavasa the Rav. Here is the brisa that supports Rav, that the machlokas is when the plank is 4 tefachim wide, but less than 4 tefachim wide, everyone agrees is kosher. If you use planks of cedar, she'ein boyan arba, which have less than 4 tefachim of width, everyone agrees that it's kosher. Yesh boyan arba, if the width is 4 tefachim wide, Reb Meir posel, Reb Yehuda machshir. Reb Meir says it's posel, Reb Yehuda says that it is kosher. So we see this machlokas when it is 4 tefachim, like Rav. Reb Yehuda says, Reb Yehuda Maisa b'shas hasakana, that there was taka, a story, an incident that happened at a dangerous time, which is interesting. Of course, Reb Yehuda Reb Eli was alive during the times of the Romans. We learned about Masechta Shabbos and Daf Lamed Gimel about what happened, right, that with Reb Shimon ben Yochai, and the Romans were chasing after him. He was also contemporary, right, he was a contemporary of Shimon ben Yochai who got chased away by the Romans. They wanted to kill him. He was a contemporary of Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, who was one of the Asar Arugei Malchus. He was a contemporary, right? There was a story with Rabbi Yossi, who the Romans exiled to Sipori, and then they made the Rabbi Yehuda, the Rosh Madabim B'chol Makom. Anyways, the point being that he lived during the time of the Romans, and there was a time that it was very dangerous to be Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Shevienu nesarim she'ayu boyan arba, and we brought planks that had 4 tefachim of width. V'sikachnu al gabe mirpeses, and we put it up on a balcony. V'yashavnu tachten, and that's what we sat under. So we see that you are allowed to use planks that are 4 tefachim wide. Amru lo, they said to him, Misham Raya, are you seriously bringing a proof from there? Ein shas hasakana raya, you can't bring a proof from a dangerous situation. That was okay, right? The whole reason why you're not allowed to use these planks is out of a gezerah, right? The gezerah is tikra. They're not going to make that gezerah when it's a dangerous time. Fine. Tani Kavasi to Shmuel, now we have a brayso supporting Shmuel. Sikicha b'nesorim shel erez, if you use as schach planks of cedar, sheish boin arba, that they have 4 tefachim of width, divyakob psula, everyone agrees that it's possible. And boin arba, if it doesn't have 4 tefachim of width, Reb Meir posel, Reb Meir posel, Reb Meir says it's possible, Reb Yehuda machshir, Reb Yehuda says kosher. So more than 4 tefachim, everyone says possible. If it's less than 4 tefachim, so then Reb Meir says possible, Reb Yehuda says machshir. So we see that according to this brayso, it's like Shmuel, that the machlokas is davka when it's less than 4 tefachim. Umoder Reb Meir, now Reb Meir agrees, Shem Yesh, these next two things are like a little bit weird. Umoder Reb Meir agrees, Shem Yesh be neser leneser kim lo neser, that if between each plank, if in between each of, so Reb Meir says that you're not allowed to use these planks that are between 3 and 4. Now, if you, now says actually, Rashi points out that this could even be talking about if it's more than 4 tefachim wide. But he admits, but the point is that the chiddush is that even according to Reb Meir, who says that you're not allowed to use, he's more machmir, says you're not allowed to use these planks that are between 3 and 4 tefachim, even he admits, Shem yesh bein neser leneser kim lo neser, that if you leave space between each plank, the equivalent of the side, the width of the plank, so if, I don't know if it's a 3 tefach plank, so then you leave 3 tefachs of space, that you could then just put like some schach in between, and then it becomes kosher. And Rashi explains this stuff. We're talking about a situation where the sukkah is like 8 amos wide, and then it kind of meets in the middle. So you say dofen akuma from the sides, then you have schach in the middle, because whatever you're going to line it up so you have 2 kind of portions of schach next to each other. Fine. Umoder Reb Yehuda, and Reb Yehuda admits sheim nasan aleh neser sherachav arba tefachim kshera. But even Rabbi Yehuda, who says that, he's the one who's more lenient when it comes to between 3 and 4 tefachim, even he admits that if you have a plank that is 4 tefachim wide, kshera, the sukkah is kosher, like if it's from the side, so you can say dofen akuma, but ve'eni shedim tachtav, but you don't sleep under it, vayoshin tachtav, le'yotzei de chova, so he's not, doesn't fulfill his obligation of sleeping in the sukkah. Fine. Givaldig. Itmar, it was stated, Hafchan al tzidein, if you take a plank that is 4 tefachim wide, and then you flip it on its side, right? So let's say let's say the side, it was 4 tefachim wide, but 1 tefach, tall or whatever, and then you flip it on its side. So, Rav Huna Amar Psula, Rav Huna says that the sukkah is nonetheless possible. Even though you're very fancy and you flipped it on its side, and now it's only 1 tefach, wide, because it's vertical, it's standing up. Says Rav Huna, it's very, very fancy, but we're not impressed. It's, pasol schach is pasol schach, no matter how you flip it. Rav Chizda, Rav Bar Huna Amrei, whereas Rav Chizda and Rav Bar Huna say, kshera, then no, as long as you flip it, well then it's no longer like you do it in your house, and therefore it's, you're not going to say, well, why don't I just sit in my house? It's different, it's not like your house. Ikler Rav Nachman the Surah, this is very interesting. Rav Nachman visited Surah. It's interesting for a million reasons. It's interesting because Rav Nachman is like a super early Tana, contemporary of Rav Huna. Rav Nachman was also in Narda. Rav Huna was in Surah. Rav Chizda was also in Surah. Rabbi Rav Huna was the son of Rav Huna, so he was also in Surah. So it's just like an interesting anecdote that Rav Nachman was visiting from Narda. He came to Surah, which is where Rav Huna was, and lo and behold, there were Rav Chizda and Rav Huna's son, Rabbi Rav Huna, who argued with Rav Huna when it came to this halacha. So basically, Rav Nachman visited Surah, and there was an opportunity for Rav Chizda and Rabbi Rav Huna to ask Rav Nachman regarding this question about if you take the schach that's too wide, but then you flip it on its side. Ul ligabi Rav Chizda Rabbi Rav Huna. So now Rav Chizda and Rabbi Rav Huna went to ask Rav Nachman. Amrile, they said to him, Hofkon al tzidein mau. So they asked the kasha, if you take this schach that's too wide, but you flip it on its side, mau, is it now okay? Amlu psula. Naisu kshvudin shamateches. So Rav Nachman says it's possible. He doesn't just say it's possible, he says why it's possible. He said, look, because these schach, these planks that are too wide, they're possible no matter how you flip them. They're basically the equivalent of like metal skewers. You can't use them for schach. Amlu Rav Huna. So now Rav Huna said to his son Rabbi Bar Rav Huna and to Rav Chizda, who was also a student of Rav Huna and a contemporary of Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Lo Amri Lechu, didn't I say to you, Amu Kavase, that they say like me? Amrule. So they said to Rav Huna, but Umi Amr Lon Mar, time of Lo Kablinan Minay. It's not like you told us a reason for it and we didn't accept it. You just said possible, that you didn't say anything more than that. Rav Huna said to them, Umi Ba'isu Minay, time of Lo Amri Lechu. Did you ask me for a reason that I didn't tell you? Okay, fine. So Rav Nachman came and he actually didn't just say that it's possible, but he gave a reason for it, which is once the schach is too wide, it becomes possible, and that's that even if you flip it over. Let's say that this supports Rav Nachman and Rav Huna. If you have a sukkah that is smaller than 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, it's smaller than Rosh Ruba v'Shulchano, or as we learned about in Masechta Eruvin, in Masechta Pesachim, in Masechta Shabbos, about that a gedi, if a gedi in bokenbo, that if when it comes to good achis, right, an imaginary wall going down, we say that if a little goat is able to walk under the wall, you can no longer say good achis. So that's what we're talking about here, right? If there's an opening on the bottom of the wall so that a little goat can walk through. Or you put on the sukkah a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, even though you only put it in 3 tefachim. Psula, in all these cases, it's pasul echi dami lav kigon she'afchan al tzidein. What does it mean that it's a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, but you only put it in 3 tefachim? Is it not that it was 4 tefachim wide, but like 3 tefachim tall, and you flipped it on its side? So we see that even when you flip it on its side, it's not allowed? No. Achab ma'askin on here where it's talking about going to ancha puma de matflalsa de ayol tlasa legyo ve'apikchad levar. No, it's you put on the opening of the tent, as Rashi of the sukkah. As Rashi explains, Kilu, imagine you have a sukkah that has 3 walls and it's open on one side, and right at the entrance of this side, you then put a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, even though there's 1 tefach hanging over, right? So really inside the sukkah is only 3 tefachim. The ayol tlasa legov that it goes 3 tefachim inside. V'apikchad devar, and 1 tefach is sticking outside. Ta'avale psala yotze min hasukah, psala yotze min hasukah nido kisukah, and any, right, and the reason why this is not allowed, it's treated like a plank that's 4 tefachim, even though 1 tefach is hanging over, is because psala yotze min hasukah, any like schach that's overhanging the sukkah is treated like the sukkah. So therefore, even this overhang is like the sukkah, and it's therefore considered like you're using a plank that's 4 tefachim wide. Chevra, wow, we made it through this daf. Did you guys think we'd make it through? I don't know. This is insane. We did like a daf and a half basically because of my brain malfunction yesterday. And also it was hard freaking stuff. Anyways, the daf started off with really with the statement of Menashe Bar Gada, who says that when you harvest grain in order to use it for schach, so then it doesn't have yados hatuma anymore. And we wanted to say that it's machlokas tanoim, because we say that if you use if you use grain for schach, so the Tanakama says that there's no yados, and Acherim says that there is yados, and then we were trying to figure out exactly how this makes sense. Essentially, we said that it's talking about where you crush the grain, and that's why the Tanakama says that it doesn't have yados in that particular case, and meaning it's talking about where you initially harvested the grain for food, and that is why Acherim say that there is yados because you initially harvested it for food, whereas the Tanna Kama says, yeah, but you crushed it, so it no longer has yados. But Acherim holds like Rabbi Yossi that even if you crush it, it still maintains yados. And then we got to a new Mishnah that machlokas between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to use planks in your sukkah. Reb Meir says you're not allowed to use planks in the sukkah. And the question is, what are these planks? Rav says that these planks are planks that are 4 tefachim wide, and Rabbi Yehuda says that you are allowed to use them because we don't make this gezeres tikra that we're worried you're going to sit in your house. And Reb Meir says we do say gezeres tikra. Shmuel says, right, but according to Rav, if it's less than 4 tefachim, everyone says that it's kosher. Whereas as Shmuel says, no, the machlokes dafka between 3 and 4 tefachim. But if it's 4 tefachim wide, so then everyone says that it is going to be possible. We then got to an interesting, we were then proving different ways, this way or that, but then we got to a interesting question towards the end, which is, what happens if you take a plank that's 4 tefachim wide, but then flip it on its side? So now it's technically, no longer 4 tefachim wide, and it's also not the way that you would sit in your house. So Rav Huna said, no, possible is possible. Rav Nachman agrees with him. Rabba bar Rav Huna and Rav Chizda wanted to argue and say, no, as long as you flip it on the side, there's no longer a reason to say the Gzeres Tikra, and it should be okay. Chevra, that was Daf Yudal of Masechta Sukkah. Oh, one interesting thing about Daf Yudal is Yad is like Yados, which was interesting. That was the whole thing that we were talking about today. Anyways, Chevra, that was Daf Yudal. Crazy Daf. Hope you have a crazy awesome day. Cheers.